So, can everyone see the screen okay? Here's Stuart just arriving. Okay, so welcome everybody to week 5 of Discovering Buddhism, module 3 well, this topic is about presenting the path, and the path means something very specific in the Buddhist context. Does everybody remember what a path is?
As in like the path to enlightenment?
Yes.
Yeah.
But what exactly is it? You know, if we're trying to define it, what is it exactly? It's a path to enlightenment. What is that? What is that? Is that a book? Is it a teacher? Is it you know, somewhere in the Himalayas? Where is it?
So isn't the path the Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment, the sets of steps that helps us to achieve that?
Yeah, that's what Jake said, a path to enlightenment. Yeah, but what is that?
A specific mind?
Mind. That's what I'm trying to get to. Good.
Okay.
Path is a mind. That's something we have to keep reminding ourselves of. It's not a place that we're trying to get to, you know, some holy place up there in the clouds. It's not some kind of magical place where all the Buddhas are sat kind of having a tea break and a coffee, thinking, congratulate themselves because they've done it all. It's actually, these are all minds that we're generating one series after the other. So it's like, you know, I keep coming back to the musical analogy, you know, you've got to a certain level like grade 1, and you could say, you know, you've developed the skills of the level of grade 1. So by generating minds in the small parts of the Lam Rim, the small scopes of the Lam Rim, then you could say you're moving along at a certain pace. A path is a very good analogy, but it's just an analogy. What it actually means, you know, the path just to help us get an idea of what we're doing here, but it actually means the minds. So we're developing certain realizations, one after the other. We're kind of becoming familiar with them all, and then concentrating on the low ones first to get those really solid, spontaneous and irreversible, etc. And then we build on those to the next one, etc. And then they come in a sequence, but we kind of have we have a taste of all the points of the path. We have to know where we're going, but we get really good at the beginning ones first. And the more, you know, profound and realized those first steps are, it means there's a better base for the ones that come upon it later. Yeah. And you can't skip them. You can't just jump from 1 to 5. You've got to go through 1, 2, 3, and 4. Otherwise, you know, you've got nowhere to step from. So when we say presenting the path, we're talking about realizations. Now, realizations is an odd term we use in Buddhism. It was a bit bizarre when I first started to hear this term, but now I've said it so much, I just kind of forget that maybe it's a bit weird to the ordinary person on the street. Have you used this term before, a realization? What does that mean, a realization? There it is.
That you experience and understand something like emptiness.
Yeah, that's a very good description. Yeah, there's different levels, but you know, when we say realization, we're talking about a point where you've realized something which you didn't know before, like let's say something like realized 1 + 1 is 2. So before you wouldn't have had an understanding of 1 + 1 is 2. You just, someone says to you, don't know what it means, but then you know, if you see 1, if you have another 1 and you add them both together, you get 2, and you realize, you know, that kind of logic or that kind of process is like a point in the mind that you understand that, and that becomes, you know, something that then is your knowledge, if you like. You've understood, you know, not just someone else is telling you, you've got it yourself. And the realization is a bit like that. Sometimes someone described to me like a penny drops. You suddenly go, oh, that's what it means. We've had those little kind of moments, you know, in our experience of being humans already. But here we're talking about particular Buddhist realizations, minds that the Buddha suggested we need in our toolbox on the spiritual path to become fully enlightened for others' welfare. Yeah. So those kind of path and a realization and a mind, they're all kind of telling the same story here in our module 3. So let's go straight into a motivation meditation for this session. As usual, we're going to look at 2 minds as part of our meditation together. Refuge and bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is essentially the topic we're going to be mentioning tonight. So let's look at some of those together. So just find yourself a comfortable place to meditate in. And maybe just take a few deep breaths in and out through the nose in your own time. And this first mind we're going to generate is a mind of refuge. And maybe this week we'll think of, some specific things that are kind of causing us obstacles. Let's just bring it back to some immediate things in our experience, difficulties with coping with the pandemic, difficulties with not being able to be social as usual, restrictions in our freedom, etc. We're feeling isolated. And these all kind of play on the mind. And these negative emotions that kind of get generated because of these external conditions are what make us miserable. So then refuge is a mind that thinks, I want to be free from these minds. I don't want to experience this suffering, this unhappiness. And whilst I can't change the things outside, I can change the mind, that's under my control. Nothing much else is, right? But at least we can say that our minds are ours. No one else can do it. So then for Buddhists, we would take refuge or kind of safety in the minds of the Buddha, the mind of the Buddha's teachings, which is compassion, patience, wisdom, generosity. So when we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the teachings, and the Sangha is those people, realizations on the path already. But really what it comes down to is our own minds are the refuge. That's what's called the inner refuge. The Dharma in our own minds, those paths in our minds. Whatever level we've got already, take refuge in those. So when things are difficult, we can turn towards those minds to protect us. So let's just say this verse together 3 times and bring some of that to mind, just to make it something meaningful for yourself. I'll chant it twice in Tibetan and then once in English, if I remember, because I keep forgetting. Sangye chudang soki chonam la jancho padu dani kapsu ji dagi chenengi besenamgi dola penchi sangye dupada shor. Sangye chudang soki chonam jancho padu dani kapsu ji dagi chenengi besenamgi Dola penche sangye drupala shor. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so let's just recap on where we've been for the last few weeks. Week 1, the Buddha and the Four Noble Truths, looked at the Buddha's life story and how his first teaching was the Four Noble Truths, and then after After that, those 40 years, the Buddha was in northern India, 2,500 years ago. Everything is kind of laid out on the basis of that blueprint, the Four Noble Truths. Week 2, we looked at how the Buddha's teachings get to us. This line, if you like, of unbroken masters with realizations. Those great men and women who've generated these realizations and become enlightened themselves, or or at least levels of that. And a teacher who was the first person who created the Lam Rim text called Lamp on the Path, put all the Buddha's teachings into a series of steps, one after the other. And that's what Geshe Jampa is going to be teaching tomorrow night, back again, if you're interested in that. To hear it from, these things from a proper monk who's such a scholar and a practitioner like Geshe Jampa is very precious. So do think about giving some time for that. It's just an hour and a half tomorrow from 6 o'clock. Because he does it in French time. He's it's actually in Spain, but France, he moves between France and Spain, but they're an hour ahead. So 7 till 8:30 for him, but 6 to 7:30 for us. And then week 3, we start to look at, weeks 3, 4, and 5, where we're looking at the Lam Rim divided into these 4 parts. So week 3, we looked at preliminaries and the small scope. Week 4, we looked at middle scope. And week 5, we're looking at the great scope. So that's the last bit of the Lam Rim this week. And then next week, we'll look at a summary and a bit about Tantra, how that fits into the path. Next week is the last one of this module. Yeah, so that's where we are. So here is some words from Lama Zopa. I'm just going to read these out in case you can't read the screen. I'm just going to shrink the window because I can't see myself. Use problems as ornaments, seeing them as extremely precious, because they make you achieve enlightenment quickly by getting you to achieve bodhicitta. Experience these problems on behalf of all sentient beings, giving all happiness to sentient beings. This is the ornament. So what we're doing here is we're looking at, we're going to start to see a bit about what it means to be a bodhisattva, right? We're just going to start to look in the mind of kind of thoughts, if you like, or the processes that a bodhisattva goes through on a day-to-day basis. The thing is, people don't tell you if they have realizations or not. It's very rare. So, we don't know that people are bodhisattva because they won't tell us. And that's a strange anomaly for us uninitiated ones, just beginning on the path. Why doesn't everyone, brag about it if they've got them? I mean, I've come to my own conclusions a bit about that, I suppose. Maybe you'll have your own thoughts about that. But it's okay for a certain level of people to say, well, someone else is apparently. I've noticed that's a bit of a loophole. Other lamas will declare that other people are Buddhas or bodhisattvas, but not themselves. They go, no, I'm not, but you are. So it kind of, so, you can certainly think about, on this planet, there are definitely Buddhas and bodhisattvas. That's for sure, right? Because we're in quite a unique position. I mean, you already know it, our space in the universe, to have a planet that is just the right spot between, the sun and the cold, this kind of hot and cold, this kind of Goldilocks region, is quite rare. We know that already from physics, from astronomy, right? That bit in the middle of where our planet is quite rare. So to find a place where there's human beings on one of those planets is even rarer. So, and the best way that, we can learn the spiritual path is by being human. We ought to look at that in the first, right? By having a precious human rebirth, looked at that in the small scope. The preliminary is the small scope, precious human rebirth. So we know that that is the best place to be. I'm going to do a long way around with this one, but go with it. So in all that all those possibilities, then, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are able to be born where they like. After a certain point, Bodhisattvas can be born where they like, and certainly Buddhas can. So they're going to go to straight where the most benefit. So the most benefit is if they teach, and then we do the work ourselves. That's where they're trying. All the different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are trying to get us to that level, and then they can teach. Yeah, they're kind of pushes from both extremes of samsara into the middle, where they can then explain, and then we do the work, and then we're off. Right. So for sure, there are Bodhisattvas and Buddhas on this planet. And the best way they can do that is by teaching us. So therefore they manifest as teachers. You see where I'm going with that one? So therefore, for sure, some of our teachers, at least, are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. For sure. It'd be too bizarre to think there'll be no Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on the planet at all after everything they did to help sentient beings. Does that make sense? So logically, you know. And you can tell to a certain extent by when you spend some time with these people, and the work that they do and the power that they have, you know, to kind of influence positivity around them. Can you imagine being around the Dalai Lama, for example? It must be a phenomenal experience. You know, I've had the fortune to meet, you know, Dalai Lama a couple of times personally, and it's quite a powerful experience. And I'm not wanting to go too much into my own spiritual history, but it might just be interesting for you to know that, you know, I've had, when I was at the Tam Monastery, you know, the monastery was a great place for many great teachers to come and visit. And I met a number of lamas there. And to be around these beings is quite special. You realize that the way that they act, the way they talk. I had the fortune to drive some of them around the places, you know, to drive for them in France and stuff, and into Spain. And you know, the way that they think is completely different to how we normal people think, you know, non-bodhisattvas. So why I'm mentioning all this is because most people would say the Lama Zopa is a great bodhisattva, at least, if not a Buddha. And some of the lamas that he helps us meet, that he encourages to teach in our centers, are also bodhisattvas, beings who've got bodhicitta, realized emptiness directly, etc. Kadrula is another one. You know this female lama called Kadrula? You've seen a picture. It's a beautiful Tibetan lady. She's not a nun, just a lay person, but said to be an Arya Bodhisattva, a Bodhisattva who's realized emptiness directly. So these beings, we're going to talk a bit more about that. So the way they see the world is different from us because their whole goal is to liberate all sentient beings. So that they want the things that are going to help their spiritual path. As we looked at in the Transforming Problems module, if you remember last year, we talked about this in the 6 sessions we did there. They want the problems, they want the difficult situations because then they can practice. It's like a pianist or a guitar player, Jake, wanting all the really difficult pieces so that they can become the best they can possibly be. You know, they want all the Rachmaninoff, you know, if you're a pianist, or I don't know what the guitar composers are. Well, the complicated guitar composers, like they really, you know, just like you think, whoa, I need like 3 sets of hands for that one.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe like Joe Pass. He's a jazz guitarist.
Joe Pass, okay, right. So exactly like Joe Pass then. So you think you want the kind of music like that he composed, because you know you want to increase your skills. You know, the more complicated stuff you get, the better you get, right? I was thinking it's a bit like also, you know, if you're like a gamer, if you practice games, you want all the big bosses to defeat all the bosses at the end of these levels, because then you get the more points and you advance quicker, you level up quicker. So it's a bit like that. The bodhisattvas are just, you know, looking for all the bosses and samsara so they can defeat them and level up. That's how you should think of it, right? And those bosses are the problems. Yeah. Problems like ice cream, as Lama says. So let's look into this in a bit more detail. Just to recap where we are, we've done these first 3 sections here. We're looking at the 4th one today. Yeah. Can you remember, can anyone tell me a meditation that comes with the preliminary meditations?
Meditation on precious human rebirth.
Good. Anybody tell me a meditation that goes in the small scope?
Refuge and karma.
Yeah, good. What about middle scope? Somebody else?
Suffering, meditation of suffering, is that one?
Yeah, what kind of suffering?
It's in the upper realms, the causes. Is that right?
Yeah, Very good. Very nice. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And great scope then. What meditations go in the great scope? Well, we'll look at that as we go along today. Just a reminder is that each of the scopes has these kind of pattern where the Buddha gives his meditations to generate the aspiration of that person's scope, and then the practices that actually attains the aspiration. Yeah. And just to remind ourselves what those aspirations are. Small scope, to gain a precious human life next life. That's their only goal, the small scope being. All the practices of that scope end up getting us to that point, to have a precious human birth next. Yeah. Middle scope practices. So the aspiration in the first half is generates that wants to completely liberate from all samsara. And then the practices actually do that. Because to have the aspiration isn't enough, right? You've got to have the aspiration, otherwise you can't get there. So that's why it's divided into those two. You've got to have the wish to do it, and then you have to actually do the practices that do it. Otherwise, you won't be able to do the practices without the aspiration to do it. It's quite common sense, but it's just I just want to make that clear. And then great scope, the aspiration is enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's what we're looking at today. Well, that already.
Are the practices ethics, concentration, and wisdom?
For which scope?
Great scope.
No. What are they? Which scope are they? Anybody?
Middle.
Middle. Top, middle, or bottom? Remember
Middle.
that one, Barrymore? Hotspots. Boo, boo, boo. It was an old game show in the UK. Anyway, so it was the middle scope, that one. So practices of the small scope. So somebody to list 3 practices then, small, middle, and great scopes. Can anyone do that? A lot of thinking going on.
Practices of the middle scope, I think we've just done, which was ethics, concentration, and wisdom.
Small scope.
Small scope is
Flicking through his notes.
cheating. Refuge and karma. Abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions.
Right.
And purification through the 4 powers.
Yeah, very good, very nice. And then practices of the great scope.
The ones that are on screen, 7-point method of cause and effect.
Okay, we haven't got there yet. Then obviously, I was wondering if anyone was going to jump the gun and know what I was going to cover today.
I would suspect it's something to do with bodhicitta.
Yes, that's quite right. Okay, so so first of all, then we're going to look at the first half of the scope. So the first half of the scope is about generating the aspiration. So that's why I called it here, how to generate bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word. Bodhi means awakening, like Bodhi tree or Bodhisattva, great awakening being. Bodhicitta. Chitta is the mind, awakening mind. Yep. It's the mind that wants to awaken. And that is the when you have bodhicitta, then it means you're a bodhisattva. Yeah, which is what we call a person who has bodhicitta is called a bodhisattva. That makes sense? How you do that then is just like in the other scopes where the Buddha was giving his methods to generate this aspiration. Here, there's a few methods. So there's 2 methods that we have on this planet. A 7-point method of cause and effect is one. Equalizing and exchanging oneself with others is another one. And then you can also combine the 2, which the Tibetans did, into 11 steps, or sometimes slightly more steps, depending on how you list it. I'm just checking what slide I've got next before okay, we'll go back in. So let's explain a little bit about this. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about how generating bodhicitta, because that's a whole module of DB. This point is just to get an outline of the path. Has anybody heard of the 7-point method of cause and effect already? All shaking heads there. No. What about if I tell you the first step is recognizing sentient beings as having been your mother? Does that ring a bell? Stuart, does that ring a bell with you? No.
It does, but I couldn't tell you any more about it.
Okay. So I think we're on the same page. So we've heard of that before then. So to see all sentient beings as having been your mother is the first step in the 7 points. So you have heard of it, you know, and maybe you don't know how it fits in the bigger picture, but that's where it fits now. So now you know. I mean, basically this module, we're just learning outlines in the big picture, isn't it? So here we are, the first one of those 7 on the 3rd scope of the blah, blah, this level, this level, this level, is how to recognize sentient beings as being your mother. Second step, do you want to know the 7 steps? Why not? Recognizing the kindness of those mothers. So you do meditations then on how kind your mother has been in this life. Because you can't remember the previous mothers right now. So you concentrate on what you can remember from this life, and you kind of recall that kindness in the sense, you know, that your mother looked after you, you know, we're all still here, so she didn't abort us in the womb. She fed us, we still survived. She gave everything she could for us. She worked hard for us night and day. We were probably crying sleepless nights when we were a baby, you know, for the first, what was it, you know, 2 years. We were completely defenseless, naked, absolutely nothing, just crying and whinging for food or drink. And we poop at the other end. It was just completely hopeless. So, you know, thanks to our mothers, or maybe you can replace mother with another guardian if there's something worked better for you in your circumstances, but mother tends to be the most common one. So that's why it's called mothers. It could be a grandparent or a father, perhaps. So, you know, it can get quite complicated sometimes. We make it a bit more complicated for us in the West with mothers, but so you have to just adjust. But you can't deny that the effort and the energy that went into making us, you know, educated, fed, clean, watered, etc., going to school, encouraging us with our learning, etc., and then giving us holidays. So it's just endless ways that they gave us energy and time and love and care and nurtured us, right? So that's just one sentient being, right? We're talking about all sentient beings. So in the first step, you already identified that all sentient beings have been your mother. So in the second step, you then think about all the kindness of that mother. And then all the other sentient beings are also that kind because they've also been your mother. So then all sentient beings are really kind. The third step then is you want to repay the kindness. So you do some meditation on that. There's like analogies you can use. For example, if your mother, who's old and infirm and blind, is wandering along the road by the edge of a cliff, you desperately reach out to help your mother, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want her to suffer. She can't help herself at that point. She's too frail and ill or elderly. So you dash over and help. You don't have to think about it. It's just like because you have a history or a connection with this sentient being, because they did so much for you, and you recognize all that kindness, then you just dive in, whatever is needed, right, straight away. So it's a very powerful way of feeling close and responsible for sentient beings, whatever they need, right? And then because we won't go into detail, but because that first step is quite complicated, but because you then understood that about all sentient beings, that becomes then your responsibility for all living beings. Yeah. So I'll skip through them quite quickly there. So just note that that's some more study needs doing there, because that first step is one of the most difficult points in the whole of the Lam Rim, actually. Pabonka Rinpoche, in his book, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, identifies 2 that are the most difficult in the whole of the Lam Rim meditations. One of them is this first point of the 7 points, recognizing all sentient beings having been your mother. And the second one is to see the guru as a Buddha, which comes into the topic of the how to relate to a spiritual teacher, the first one. So those 2 are the most difficult ones. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up if we don't get it. So that's verse 3. Is that what I got to, right? And there's verse 3 about feeling close and feeling like, you know, you have some kind of responsibility for those beings. Then 4 and 5 is great love and great compassion, or great compassion and great love. They go either way around. Number 6 is called the special intention, which is that you take on responsibility. Think, I'm going to help all these sentient beings. It's my duty. And the effect is number 7, which is bodhicitta. So you're going through all these steps. I'll skip through them quite quickly there. But what happens in the 6th step is you realize you want to enlighten all sentient beings and help them all reach full enlightenment, but you haven't got the skills. You haven't got all the things you need. You're lacking. So therefore, you realize you have to become enlightened to help. And then that's where you get the seventh one, the effect, bodhicitta. So equalizing the exchange of oneself is a bit more complicated. I mean, it's less steps, it's only 4 steps. But that has more to do with understanding emptiness, and it gets a bit more tricky. So I won't explain that one so much here, but that's another method there. And then you can combine some of those into, you combine those 2 into 11 steps. So I'm just going to, I wrote bookmark it here. This is Geshe Tashi's book on the FBT course, Awakening Mind. So you start off with, it's like the first few points of the 7-point method, or the first few, then you insert equalizing, exchanging oneself, and then the last few points of the 11 are the last few of the 7-point method. Does that make sense? Anyway, so maybe so that's how you generate bodhicitta. Simple, huh? There's other things that go around it. So when we do the module properly on the Discovering Buddhism later on, you'll see like some preliminary meditations that are helpful. And Lamrim meditations in the text, or generally always start with the benefits of a certain mind to help us generate some enthusiasm. So bodhicitta is no different. So like at the beginning of Bodhisattva's Deeds by Shantideva, which is the kind of Bodhisattva's handbook. Sometimes it's called that, which I think is really quite nice. The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life always reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The Bodhisattva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. In the first chapter of Shantideva's text there, he explains the benefits of bodhicitta as a kind of way to kind of get excited and enthusiastic about the mind, which you want to generate. So bodhicitta, then, when you've generated it, we skipped a bit there, but anyway, bodhicitta, when you generated it, has these 2 aspirations: the wish to liberate all sentient beings and the wish to become enlightened oneself. It has those 2 parts to bodhicitta. So you're going along those 7 steps, for example, and then you want to liberate all sentient beings, but you realize you haven't got all the skills. So then comes the second one: you want to become enlightened yourself, so you can help all the sentient beings. What are the practices then? Once you've generated it, how you actually do it is you engage in what's called the Bodhisattva's Deeds, the Bodhisattva's practices of the 6 perfections. They are generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. You may notice that some of them are the same as the 3 higher trainings, right? Which are the 3 the same?
Ethics, concentration, and wisdom.
Right. So this is like, a superior level of those: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So everything that the Bodhisattva does is vast, and all that's attached, all the actions that's done with bodhicitta, or done by the Bodhisattva, is vast. All the karma that's created in relation to bodhisattvas and bodhicitta is vast, because it's kind of multiplied. I remember the way I think about it is it's multiplied by all sentient beings. Everything they do is multiplied by a lot. Whether that's infinite or just uncountable is a debate for another time. But so when we're talking about bodhicitta a lot, we have this phrase a lot, don't we? All sentient beings. Do we know what that means? All sentient beings? Have you got that a clear concept in your mind of what we're talking about when we say all sentient beings?
It means every living being.
Yeah. Geshe Tashi used to call it all living beings. But that's a bit of a strange one to say, really, because then you're not going to include any dead beings, are you? But I'm sure he had a point when he translated that into English for us. Never got to ask him that. Sentient being seems a bit weird, a bit cold, doesn't it? But I've used it so much now, I just don't think about it. Does it seem weird to you to say sentient beings? We don't use it in any other context. I never heard anybody else talking about the sentient beings. My dear sentient being, my mother, my father, that sentient being over there. We don't use it, do we? It's just strange. But it's a bit crazy sometimes. True. But you get the point. Now, interesting from a Buddhist point of view, a sentient being has a very specific context. It means a person or an entity that has a mind. The Tibetans have a very nice phrase. It's called Sem Chen. Have you heard that one? Sem, S-E-M. Well, I'll just spell it in English way, but obviously don't spell it that way in Tibetan. And Chen, C, this is how we write it phonetically anyway. C-H-E-N, Sem Chen, mind possessor. Sem is the mind, Chen, possessor, mind possessor, something that possesses a mind. So you have to be clear what possesses a mind and what doesn't. So according to the Buddhist view, trees are not semchens. Flowers, plants are not semchens. They can have lots of semchens on them or in them, living on them, wherever, but they're not semchens themselves. Yep, according to this view. The Buddhist systems, you know, like non-Buddhist systems that say, you know, plants, and even there's like Gaia theory, which says the planet is a sentient being, right? But that's not the Buddha's view. So don't get confused. Don't mix systems up. Is what I'm trying to say. Otherwise, we'll get into trouble later on if you're trying to save a plant or a tree. It's not going to be able to do very well if it hasn't got a mind. Anyway, we won't go into that. But does that make sense? Just to get clear on what sentient beings are, because if the point of the Bodhisattva is to liberate all sentient beings, you've got to be clear what it is you're trying to liberate. And that includes, you know, beings in all realms. We're talking about all, and it is a massive, massive amount. Every single living being, wherever they are, wherever they exist, your job, you've chosen it, you know, you're inspired by compassion and love to help all of them. They can't do it all at once. It's going to take some time, but it doesn't matter because you understand that these beings are your mothers. So however long it takes to find them and get to them, you know, you'll do it because they are actually your mother. They have been your mother. Just because you don't remember doesn't mean they're not your mother, isn't it? You know, if you lose your mind a bit later on in life, maybe if I get Alzheimer's later on, I won't remember who my mother is, but I still got one. She might be dead, or she might be alive, doesn't matter. But that being is still my mother. If my mother passes away and goes into the next life, is she still my mother? I don't know how to think about that. That'd be a good debate. That's not going to get into debate territory again. Anyway, so all sentient beings then is a lot. So we're not talking just about humans and animals. We're talking about hell beings. We're talking about the pretas. We're talking about the god realms. When the beings are in between those states, called the Bardo period, they're still sentient beings. They're kind of transitioning. So we have to include all those that are traveling between existences. That's a whole explanation we'll do in Death and Rebirth module. So wherever sentient beings exist, whatever realms they're in, you know, everything we do, everything a bodhisattva does is kind of multiplied by that number. So any beneficial actions they do, they get a massive amount of positive karma because it's multiplied by all that sentient beings. Okay, small print is also that if we help a bodhisattva or a Buddha who's working for all those, we also get the benefit of positive karma multiplied by all that, because by, you know, helping them, we're helping all sentient beings. So we get that positive karma. If we can generate ourselves, that'd be better. But, you know, even if we're helping them, we're tapping into that massive potential, that massive power. Yeah. And the small point is, if you hinder or hurt a bodhisattva, then you're hurting all sentient beings. So the karma is then very heavy. It has to go both ways, unfortunately. If you get angry and kind of hate, you know, or kill, heaven forbid, a bodhisattva or a Buddha, the negative karma is just massive because you've hindered all sentient beings everywhere from being helped. So you have to be careful with bodhisattvas. They're very powerful. So let's look at the 6 perfections then. Here we are, generosity. They go in order of which ones are easiest to perfect until you're a Buddha anyway. I mean, they're not perfect until you're a Buddha, but they can be kind of perfected to a certain point as a bodhisattva. Generosity is the one there that has divisions, which I won't go into, but it's the mind that wants to give. It freely wants to give away its body, resources, its virtues, you know. And generosity is a beautiful practice. It's really, it's how the world, you know, turns really, I think, body generosity, being able to give time, giving effort, etc., giving patience, giving love, giving protection. That's another one, stopping people from harm. So there's a whole series of hours and hours study and meditations you can do in generosity. It's a really beautiful perfection on. Ethics we know about. Primarily we're thinking about, you know, not harming others there, restraining from harm, and taking maybe vows or kind of promises, etc., samayas on that basis. Patience is a wonderful practice where you voluntarily take on difficulties, but at least you don't retaliate when things get difficult. And that's one we really need, for sure, right? I mean, we need all of these. But patience is one that it's not this kind of Western idea that you grit your teeth and just, it's not like a temporal thing where you grit your teeth and wait till time has passed. It's more about when things are chaotic around you, you're able to accept the problems and not get overwhelmed, but still be productive. You know, it's that kind of level. You're able to accept the difficulties around you. And actually at a certain point, like Lama Zopa says, you want those difficult situations. You know, if everything's easy, you can't really progress, you know, you're not learning anything. You need things to be difficult. Isn't it? Apparently, I'm not very good with that one myself, I have to say, but that's what my teachers tell me. You want things to be difficult because, you know, then you learn, right? We probably already figured out some of this as we, you know, as being human beings already. The times when we've learned most is when things have got really difficult for us. That's when we tend to grow. Otherwise, we tend to be a bit lazy. We just tend to kind of coast along a bit with the status quo. Only when we're forced into these moments where we grow or we meet something challenging, then we learn and then we move on. So that's what bodhisattvas are looking for. Joyous effort is really important because a joyous effort is this joy in doing all these activities. You want to do all these things. You find it makes you happy to practice all these great things. Without that, things are going to be very tricky. You know, enthusiasm, sometimes it's called. Sometimes it's called enthusiastic perseverance. Finding a joy in doing all these activities. Concentration we know about, and wisdom is the wisdom realizing emptiness. But there's other wisdoms in there, but the main one, of course, is wisdom realizing emptiness. So in a nutshell, 6 perfections, that is the practices of the Bodhisattva. If you're thinking about doing the basic program, one of the texts there is called Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And you look at all the 6 perfections in a lot of detail there. There's no text like it for looking at the 6 perfections and all about bodhicitta. So that's going to be very special when we get there. And just to recap then, this is the attitude of a person of great capacity, the wish to become enlightened for others' welfare. That's a nice way to just remember it. It's got those 2 aspirations in there, right? Can you see how they're both in there? The wish to become enlightened, and the wish for others to become enlightened. That's in there, right? I had the great fortune to be around Kajula, who I mentioned, who's this, everyone, well, those of you who know anyway, say she was this Lama who's realized emptiness directly in a bodhisattva. she actually herself called Lama Zopa a great bodhisattva, because I went to her once when we were trying to raise money for the building at German Leeds, and to, you know, get some advice from those people who are clairvoyant, you know these things and create positive karma towards these beings. Great. So we made a money offering, and we gave her some requests and said, can you please remove any obstacles we have to buying our building? And she says, you know, if you rely on the great bodhisattva Lama Zopa, you'll have no problems. I was like, oh, well, that'll be easy then. So we'll just do that. So someone just put something in the chat. Kadrula. Shall I just write it in the chat? I'll try and find out some pictures and some stuff for her. Kadrula actually isn't a name, it's just like a title. So if you search for that, you're probably not going to find who I mean. A lot at the end is just like honorific, like saying sir or something in Tibetan. So can everyone see that? That's the word I'm saying there, Kadrula. But anyway, I'll find out who, see if I can find a link to her biography or something for you later on. Anyway, she's very inspiring, and she's got this beautiful voice as well. She's been a couple of retreats with her where she's been singing, just amazing. And we had dinner with her once. I was driving her somewhere, and we went to, she wanted some dinner, so I managed to find, actually one time she wanted Wi-Fi, and the only place I could find was a McDonald's near Toulouse in France. I was very embarrassed to go to McDonald's. I said, how was the food? And she goes, ooh. Not a good time. Anyway, went to another place once, a nicer restaurant another time, and we asked her to do a dedication. Unfortunately, with somebody there was a translator as well. She didn't speak English, and the way that she was doing a dedication there before we had the food was just like a tapping into how bodhisattvas think. I would never thought of it. She was saying things like, any living being who enters this restaurant, any being who comes into this space or breathes this air or has a connection with this place, may they all find complete happiness and joy. May they all become fully enlightened. It's kind of like leaving an imprint on the space that she was surrounding, that whatever flies or people, human beings or staff, etc., or the customers, whoever was going to meet that space was going to kind of somehow be blessed by this bodhisattva's wish. I just thought, wow, these beings really just think in another dimension. They're just kind of, everything they do, they're just eating their food. It's just a whole ceremony for sentient beings. Everything they do, everything they think is for others. Lama Zopa is famous for, spending hours and hours blessing his food. If you've been around Lama Zopa, and when he's giving a food offering, you forget eating the food when it's hot, because he'll be there for hours before you can even start. Because one time, apparently his story, Lama Zopa's attendant, when Roger tells, when they're on a plane going somewhere, and the hostess brings out the food, and Lama Zopa then starts his prayers and his dedications. May this food be benefit sentient beings, and may it feed all sentient beings. And he's kind of knowing all these very amazing aspirational bodhisattva's prayers as he recites the food and everyone's waiting, etc. And he's still going and still going and going. Everyone else around him, of course, has started their food and eating. Those people are not in Rinpoche's entourage. So they're eating away and they're finished. Rinpoche still, they're dedicating and praying. And then the hostess comes around, clears all the things, and Rinpoche still, they're dedicating. And then the hostess comes to him and says, I need to take the food now. We're finished. This is like an hour or so later or something. So you take the food away. We need to clear up. She says, that's fine. Take the food. I've done my prayers. I've got the essence of that. So it's just like, to be around these beings, that you really learn what goes on in the bodhisattva's world. It's quite stunning. So I really hope you get to spend some time with these beings. We're trying our best in Leeds to bring them over when we're back up and running. We do, all the PMT centers try and working lamas into their schedules, but there isn't many of them, and they tour the world. So we get them in the UK maybe once every 2 or 3 years, but when they do come, really make a special effort to see them in person. But of course, now we're on Zoom, you can see His Holiness the Dalai Lama anytime you like, next Monday, when he's teaching for FPMT, if you haven't seen that. Okay, here's your discussion points then for today. Well, I've kind of made it more questions the last couple of weeks, some conundrums for you to think about. So here's today's conundrums. So the first one, what's the difference between a small scope person engaging in the practices of the small scope and a bodhisattva engaging in the practices of the small scope? Do you understand the question? If you don't understand the question, the answer is going to be tricky. What's the difference between a small scope person engaging in the practice of the small scope and a bodhisattva engaging in the practice of the small scope? So we've got 3 scopes: small, middle, and great. Some people are just practicing the small one. Some people are practicing the middle one. Some people are practicing the great one. But they all have to go through 1 and 2 to get to 3. They all have to go through 1 to get to 2. So everyone is doing first level of practice. But what's the difference between the great scope and the small scope being practicing the small scope? See if you can work that out. And the second question, if you get that far, if you feel like skipping the first one and going straight to the second one, which comes first, the wish to become enlightened or the wish to benefit others when you're developing bodhicitta? That's referring to those 2 aspirations, those 2 mental factors, if you like, those 2 aspirations that make up the mind of bodhicitta. Which one comes first? That is your question, if you choose to accept. Yeah. So there's no point going to breakout groups. There's only 4 of us here. So I'm just going to mute myself. Do you want me to leave that slide up, or have you got it written down? One of you's got it written down, have you? Okay, I'm just going to stop recording. Topics. Okay, so did you manage to look at both of those points, or just one?
Both, yeah.
Both of them? Okay, so let's have a look at the first one then. What's the difference between a small scope person engaging in the practice of a small scope and the bodhisattva engaging in those practices of the small scope? Or is there any practice? Was it a trick question? Or is there any difference? What do you think?
Well, I think if the bodhisattva engages in any kind of practice, they do it perfectly. And its impact is going to be karmatically massive.
Yeah.
And they're going to be doing it for the benefit of everybody.
Right.
So that's what
So that's the bodhisattva then doing this. So you're saying that's the difference then? The bodhisattva's merit.
Okay, I suppose an ordinary being, it's aspirational.
Yeah.
And a bodhisattva, they're fulfilling the practice.
I think you got some good points there. Yeah. I think it's definitely one of the things to say, that if a bodhisattva is meditating on a death is certain, and then an ordinary being who's just working for precious human rebirth next life is meditating on death is certain, the karma that the 2 will accumulate is vastly different. The bodhisattva is going to have massive amounts more because they're working for the sake of all living beings, whereas this being isn't even working to get out of samsara. They're just working to have samsaric life next. It's a bit better. So there is a big difference there. So it's a very good point now. Yeah. Anything else? What's the goal? What's the aspiration of a small scope practitioner?
Precious human rebirth in the next life.
And what's the goal of the bodhisattva?
To enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
So there's another difference then, isn't it? The aspiration is different. But the practice itself is exactly the same. Isn't it? They're both meditating on the death is certain, time is uncertain, and the Dharma will help at the time of death, etc. But what they're looking for is different out of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess there's just like a lot more depth for the bodhisattva.
Yes.
Of aspiration and understanding, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, then. So, I mean, the reason I put that question there is so that we understand that everybody is having to practice that step, that first step, but the reason where they're going to with it is different. You know, what they're trying to get out of it is different, and what they're going to accumulate on that basis is different, and the results of that are going to be different, because one's going to get enlightened as a Buddha, and one's just going to get a precious human rebirth. So even though the practice itself is exactly the same, right?
I guess that's something we weren't entirely sure on. Does the bodhisattva still do that practice? Is
Yes.
it still part of, okay.
Yeah.
So they're still engaging.
This question. So they're both, it's like, you know, as I said earlier, like the bodhisattva, when we did our analogy about, because you like analogies, you lot, don't you? When we were talking, or was it in the session where I talked about, you know, going via Wakefield and then Nottingham and London, as those 3 scopes. To get to London, you still have to go through Wakefield, still have to go through Nottingham to get to London. So the bodhisattva is going to London, not to Wakefield, but he has to go through Wakefield and Nottingham.
Well, we've got another analogy for the.
Oh
the next
God,
one.
another one. Can't bear another analogy.
Okay. So,
That's all.
Go ahead. I'm just kidding. Go
first,
ahead.
which comes first, the wish to become enlightened?
Okay, look
or-
at the second question then. So let me just recap that one. So which comes first, the wish to become enlightened or the wish to develop or wish to benefit others?
Okay, so we reckon it's like a rocket. Well, enlightenment comes first, and then the wish to benefit others. But it's like a rocket in terms of you've got the first two scopes, which are like the first two stages of the rocket. So that's to get you to enlightenment. And then on from enlightenment, we've got the bodhicitta, which takes you to the moon, and you land on the moon, and then you want to come back to benefit all other beings.
I can see where you're going with that one, but I don't know if you've understood the question already. Because it's not about being enlightened itself, it's about the wish to become enlightened.
Oh, right. Well, I still think it's the wish to become
I want to become enlightened, but I'm not enlightened. That's quite a difference, right?
I still think it's the wish to become enlightened, and then the
So you think it's the wish to become so is that what you all agree? Is that way around? When you develop a bodhicitta first, you have the wish to become enlightened and then the wish to help others.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure, John? Why not?
I know you need both of them to be a bodhisattva,
Right.
but having thought about it since we had the discussion, if you
you're not allowed to think about it after you submitted your answer.
Yeah.
First answer you've got to stick on.
after Stuart's given our answer, I've now had another thought.
Go ahead then. Go ahead.
I was just, if you practice compassion and selflessness and all the other attributes, would you gain enlightenment because of that? So in which case I would say enlightenment comes second.
It's not enlightenment, it's the wish to become enlightened.
Oh, sorry, the wish, yes.
Because the bodhisattva isn't enlightened. The bodhisattva wants enlightenment.
Yes.
If the bodhisattva was enlightened, there wouldn't be the wish to become enlightened, would there?
No.
There already.
Yeah.
So there was a difference between a Buddha and a bodhisattva. A Buddha is not a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is almost a Buddha. Well, no, can't say that. A bodhisattva is wanting to be a Buddha.
My thought was maybe it varies person to person, like depending how they're going into this, like what they want to initially get out of it.
Yeah.
And then the other one would come eventually anyway, just because they'll be like exposed to the other side through the practices, potentially.
What do you think, Adita?
Well, I thought about the bodhicitta because, like, I want to help people now. I'm not enlightened, but I want to help people now.
Right.
And of course, maybe I can't help other people, so maybe I have to help myself first,
Yeah.
and then other people.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And maybe then I get achieve enlightenment. I'm a little bit confused about the Buddha and Bodhisattva still. So you said that the Bodhisattva can be a Buddha.
No.
No,
Because the bodhisattva wants to become enlightened.
to become Buddha.
Wants to become a Buddha. So when you're a Buddha, you don't want to become a Buddha, do you?
Gary, wasn't the Buddha a bodhisattva then?
A Buddha isn't a bodhisattva, no.
Well, no, the Buddha. Was the Buddha a bodhisattva?
In the past, and maybe previously, it's like saying, is someone at grade 8, were they a grade 7 and grade 6? Yes. Is someone a grade 8, a grade 7? No, because they're grade 8.
Okay.
If I'm grade 8, I don't want to be grade 8. I'm already grade 8. Thank you very much. But I was grade 7. Yeah, so that's why we're talking about bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Is that helping, Adita? Or am I making you more confused? So a bodhisattva wants to become a Buddha for all sentient beings. And once they're a Buddha, that's fine. Then they just help sentient beings. They don't need to become a Buddha anymore. Okay, so then let's just sort of this. So the second point then, when we looked at the 7-point method of cause and effect, you were trying to get this close feeling to all sentient beings in those first 3 steps. Then you developed great love and great compassion because you desperately wanted them to be free of suffering. As the compassion. You wanted them to have all the happinesses which they don't have, and that was the great love. So all of those steps were about you wanting to help sentient beings. Then at the last minute you realized, shit, I can't do it. I haven't got all the skills. I need all the tools. I've got to become a Buddha. So then you have the wish to become enlightened. Isn't it? Pardon my swearing. But you see my point. So you first of all, you want to help sentient beings. That's the way it comes from. That's where the whole thing comes from. You want to help others because you realize that they're suffering, and then they're your dear mothers. And on that basis, you want to become enlightened. It can't go the other way around. You can't want to become enlightened. Oh, well, then I'll help other sentient beings to get there. You might as well just bliss out in nirvana. It's easier, it doesn't take as long. Anyway, think about that. Some difficult points there. I'm throwing you in the deep end a bit, aren't you? You seem like you're coping with it, though. The person who joined us at the beginning felt it was a bit too advanced. So anyway, I do my best to fit everyone in, but I'm not a bodhisattva, so I can't read what people need. I can't read their minds. All right, then. So there we are. Let's finish there for today, then. Thank you very much, everybody. I had some other slides, but I think we'll wrap it up there. I mean, the point to get from this part of the path is that bodhisattvas are like the pinnacle of the spiritual practitioners, because the capacity which they can help sentient beings is just massive compared to anyone else. The skills and the qualities and the realizations that develop are just the most superior of all the practitioners. They get the best they get the best result. They get enlightenment, which is, removal of all the afflictions in the mind. None of the practitioners get that. The small and middle scopes don't get that. And the quality of their love and compassion is the greatest of all the practitioners. All the small and middle scope practitioners have great love, and they have love and compassion. But when it gets to bodhisattvas, we call it great love and great compassion. That has a specific meaning because they're taking on responsibility of that for all living beings. So everything just becomes like phenomenally more powerful for the practitioners. Sometimes the bodhisattvas are called the Buddha's children. That's a term you hear a lot. Like they've given birth and eventually they're going to grow up into the Buddhas. So it's a great mind, bodhicitta, and at the beginning we always do our best to generate as close as we can to that mind. We're not bodhisattvas, well, I'm not, but we try to get as close as we can to that mind, get a taste for it right now. We're not there yet, but the more we can generate familiarity with it, the more we'll come to appreciate it and as being as powerful, inspiring, and helpful for others. So that's why we always finish and end with the bodhicitta motivation. So let's just do that as a dedication at the end there. So whatever positive karma we've created together by talking about the great beings, the bodhisattvas in the great scope, may it be causes for us to become enlightened for others' welfare. So now you can see how that ties in, right? May we become fully enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings, because sentient beings need our help. Just look at the planet today, right? Look at all the chaos. Imagine if we had all the skills to help, all the benefit we could provide for people. It would be stunning. So as much as you can, generate that mind of bodhicitta, a wish for others' welfare by your own enlightenment. Thank you so much, everybody. So I've gone over a bit there. Thank you very much. Next week is the last session. And those people who are wanting to take it as a completion card for this module, do bear in mind that you need to have all those readings done. If you have any confusions with any points in the card, let me know. I think we'll do the session next week, and then after that we'll arrange individual times, if you don't mind, to look at having just a chat to make sure you understood the material, etc. Not an exam, just a little chat together. And then how are you getting on with memorizing your Lamrim prayer? Is that coming along okay? Anyone struggling, or are you managing it okay? No.
I've only just started mine, but is it, so is there one that I've started the foundation of good qualities one? Is that an okay one to do?
Perfect one to do. That's one I recommend. That one, or Stuart, I said recommend just doing those first 3 or 4 verses of Lama's Opus. Lamrim.
Yeah, how many, was it the 5 verses, or
I can't remember. I'm sorry. Forget
was
now.
it all 5? Or anyway, yeah, I've got it and started it.
Just do your best. Try and get it all memorized.
Yeah.
And then let's see how it works. You've got another week or so you'll be fine. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
All right. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.